Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
Standing at Gate 12 at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, I watched my boarding pass turn invalid on the screen. 26 years old, coming home from a failed job interview, and now stranded 3 states away from home. My phone buzzed. Mom's text made my blood freeze. "Have fun walking home, loser. Should have stayed in college instead of chasing fairy tales." Then Dad chimed in, "Stop acting poor, take a bus like you should." They had no idea what I actually owned. Their faces would go pale when they discovered the truth about their supposedly worthless son Frederick. The fluorescent lights of the airport terminal felt harsh against my tired eyes as I stared at that cruel message from my mother. Helen Morrison had always been direct, but this level of cruelty cut deeper than usual. My father Robert's follow-up text was equally painful, dripping with the same condescension I'd endured my entire life. I slumped into one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs near the gate, watching other passengers board flights to destinations I could only dream of reaching tonight. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, Frederick Morrison, sitting in an airport feeling sorry for myself while my family assumed I was broke and desperate. If only they knew the truth. Growing up as the youngest of 3 boys in the Morrison household meant living in constant shadows. My older brother Marcus had become a successful corporate lawyer in Chicago, pulling down $400,000 a year representing pharmaceutical companies. Thomas, the middle child, had followed our parents' dreams by becoming an orthopedic surgeon, making even more than Marcus while saving lives and earning constant praise at family dinners. Then, there was me. The disappointment. The one who dropped out of Northwestern Law School halfway through my second year to chase what my father called internet nonsense. That was 2 years ago, and my family had been treating me like a complete failure ever since. What they didn't know was that their worthless son had quietly built something extraordinary. While they assumed I was struggling to pay rent in my modest apartment in Denver, I had actually been reinvesting every penny of profit from my outdoor gear e-commerce business back into inventory and expansion. Morrison Outdoor Enterprises wasn't just surviving, it was thriving beyond my wildest expectations. The business had started small. I'd noticed a gap in the market for high-quality, affordable camping gear that didn't require selling a kidney to purchase. Using my law school savings and a small loan, I'd started importing directly from manufacturers, cutting out the middleman markup that made outdoor adventures inaccessible to average families. Within 18 months, I was generating 7 figures in annual revenue. By the end of year 2, my net worth had climbed past $3 million. The outdoor recreation industry was booming, and I'd positioned myself perfectly to ride that wave. But I'd kept it secret from everyone, including my family. Part of it was pride. I wanted to prove I could succeed without their help or approval. Part of it was fear that they'd somehow try to take credit or control my success. And honestly, part of it was enjoying the freedom of being underestimated. The job interview I'd supposedly failed in Phoenix wasn't a job interview at all. I'd flown here to meet with executives from Pinnacle Outdoor Holdings, a massive conglomerate that wanted to acquire my company for $50 million. $50 million. The meeting had gone incredibly well, with handshake agreements and preliminary contracts ready for signing. There was just one catch. I needed to be back in Denver by 9 a.m. Monday morning for the final board meeting, where we'd sign the acquisition papers. Missing that meeting would kill the deal, and deals like this didn't come around twice. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Jake Patterson, my business partner, and the closest thing I had to a best friend, sounded frantic. "Frederick, please tell me you're on a plane right now. The Pinnacle people just called asking to confirm tomorrow's meeting time." I rubbed my forehead, feeling a headache building. "Jake, I'm stranded in Phoenix. My flight got canceled, and there's nothing else available tonight." "What do you mean stranded? Book another airline, rent a car, charter something. This is $50 million we're talking about. You think I haven't tried? It's Memorial Day weekend. Everything's booked solid, and car rentals are impossible to find. I'm looking at my options, but it's not good." Jake's silence spoke volumes. We both knew what missing this meeting would mean. Pinnacle had other acquisition targets, and they weren't going to wait around for a young entrepreneur who couldn't manage his travel schedule. After hanging up, I decided to swallow my pride and call home. Maybe my parents would understand the urgency and help me figure out a solution. Maybe this crisis would finally make them see that I wasn't the failure they believed me to be. I dialed my mother's number first, my hands actually shaking as it rang. "Frederick? What do you want? Shouldn't you be on some bus somewhere?" "Mom, listen, I need help. My flight got canceled, and I need to get home urgently for a business meeting tomorrow morning. It's really important." Her laugh was sharp and bitter. "Business meeting? Frederick, stop lying to yourself and everyone else. You don't have business meetings. You have job interviews that you fail because you're not willing to work hard for anything." "Mom, please. I'm not lying. This is legitimate. I just need help getting home tonight." "Help? You mean money? You want us to bail you out again because you're too irresponsible to plan ahead? Frederick, you're 26 years old. It's time to grow up and face consequences for your choices." The line went dead. My mother had hung up on me. I tried my father next, hoping he might be more reasonable. Robert Morrison had built a successful real estate development company from nothing, so surely he'd understand the importance of critical business meetings. "Dad, it's Frederick. I really need help. Let me guess. You're calling to ask for money because your latest scheme fell through?" "No, Dad. I need to get home for an important meeting tomorrow. My flight got canceled, and I'm stuck." "Frederick, son, listen carefully. Your mother and I have been talking. We think the best thing for you right now is to experience some real consequences. You dropped out of law school against our advice. You've been chasing these ridiculous internet business fantasies for 2 years. Maybe spending a night in an airport and taking a bus home like a responsible adult would teach you something about planning ahead." My stomach dropped. "Dad, you don't understand. This meeting could change everything." "No, Frederick. You don't understand. We're not enabling your irresponsible behavior anymore. Take the bus. It'll give you time to think about your life choices." He hung up too. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling completely abandoned. My own parents had essentially told me to suffer because they thought I deserved it. They had no idea that their irresponsible son was about to close the biggest business deal of his life. That's when I realized something that changed everything. I didn't need their help anymore. I had resources they couldn't even imagine. More importantly, I was done hiding my success from people who clearly didn't deserve to know about it. It was time for Frederick Morrison to stop playing the role of family disappointment and start showing the world who he really was. The next hour was a nightmare of phone calls and desperate internet searches. Every airline customer service representative gave me the same answer: nothing available until Tuesday morning at the earliest. Memorial Day weekend had created the perfect storm of travel demand, and my canceled ticket had put me at the absolute bottom of every waiting list. Rental car companies were equally unhelpful. The handful of vehicles still available were either broken-down economy cars with check engine lights or luxury vehicles priced at $800 per day. Even worse, the closest available pickup location was 40 miles outside Phoenix, and getting there would require an expensive taxi ride with no guarantee the car would actually be waiting. I was researching bus schedules when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Someone had created a family group chat called Frederick's Latest Drama and added everyone: my parents, Marcus, Thomas, even my sister-in-law Jennifer, and my nephew's girlfriend Emma. Marcus had written, "Heard little brother is stuck in Phoenix because he can't afford a plane ticket. Maybe this will teach him about financial responsibility." Thomas chimed in, "Called it. Told you guys he'd come crawling back for money eventually. This is what happens when you chase fantasy careers instead of getting real jobs." My mother added, "He called begging for help. I told him no. It's time for tough love. Maybe a long bus ride will give him time to think about going back to law school." But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. My father had written, "Don't worry, everyone." I made sure he learned his lesson. I called my father immediately. "Dad, what do you mean you made sure I learned my lesson?" "Frederick, sometimes parents have to make hard choices for their children's own good." "What did you do?" There was a long pause. "Marcus helped me contact the airline. We explain that you've been having some financial difficulties and might not be able to pay for your ticket. We thought it was better to cancel it before you embarrassed yourself at the airport. The world seemed to tilt sideways. You canceled my ticket? You deliberately sabotaged my flight? We saved you from making another impulsive financial mistake. You should be thanking us. I was speechless. My own family had actively sabotaged my travel, not out of concern for my finances, but to teach me what they considered a lesson about responsibility. They had orchestrated this entire crisis. Dad, do you have any idea what you've done? This isn't just about getting home. This is about a legitimate business opportunity that you've potentially destroyed. Frederick, enough with the fantasies. You don't have business opportunities. You have delusions. Maybe this experience will help you face reality. I hung up before I said something I'd regret forever. My hands were shaking with rage and disbelief. This wasn't neglect or indifference. This was deliberate cruelty designed to humiliate me and force me into admitting failure. The group chat was still active, with family members adding their own commentary about my situation. Jennifer wrote, "Maybe he'll finally understand that actions have consequences." Emma added, "This is probably the wake-up call he needs." But the worst part was reading my brother's messages. Marcus and Thomas weren't just commenting on the situation, they were bragging about their role in creating it. Marcus, I actually enjoyed calling the airline. Told them Frederick Morrison was having financial difficulties and needed to cancel his ticket to avoid charges he couldn't afford. They were very understanding. Thomas, classic little brother move. Make big plans you can't afford, then expect family to bail you out when reality hits. I realized this wasn't just about teaching me a lesson. This was about keeping me in my place as the family screw-up. My success, if they believed it existed, would disrupt the family dynamic where I served as the cautionary tale and they got to feel superior. Jake called again, this time sounding panicked. "Frederick, the Pinnacle executives are getting antsy. Their lawyers are asking about backup options if tomorrow's meeting doesn't happen. I think they're starting to consider other acquisition targets. Jake, my family sabotaged my flight. They actually called the airline and canceled my ticket." "They what? Frederick? That's insane. Why would they do that?" "Because they think I'm a failure, and they want to teach me a lesson about responsibility. They have no idea about the business. About any of it." "Okay, forget about them for now. We need solutions. What about chartering a private jet?" I'd been avoiding that option because it felt too extravagant, too much like proving my family right about my irresponsible spending. But desperate times called for desperate measures. Let me make some calls. Within 30 minutes, I'd arranged a charter flight leaving Phoenix at 11 p.m. and arriving in Denver at 1 a.m. The cost was $12,000, but it guaranteed I'd make the Monday morning meeting. More importantly, it meant my family's sabotage wouldn't destroy the biggest opportunity of my life. But I didn't tell them about the charter flight. Instead, I sent a message to the family group chat. "Thanks for the lesson, everyone. Looks like I'll be taking that bus ride after all. Should get home sometime Tuesday if I'm lucky." The responses came immediately. My mother wrote, "Good. Maybe you'll use the time wisely." My father added, "This is for your own good, son." Marcus and Thomas both sent laughing emojis. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd successfully knocked me down and forced me to accept their judgment about my life. They had no idea that their worthless brother was about to close a $50 million deal while they slept peacefully, believing they'd taught him an important lesson about financial responsibility. But I was done hiding. It was time for the Morrison family to learn some lessons of their own about underestimating people and the consequences of cruelty. As I boarded my charter flight 3 hours later, I began planning exactly how I would reveal the truth about their supposedly failed son. The charter flight was smooth and quiet, giving me time to think and plan. I'd brought my laptop and decided to use the flight time productively, reviewing contracts and preparing for the next day's acquisition meeting. But as I opened my computer, a notification popped up that changed everything. My father had accidentally shared a Google Drive link in our family group chat. The message was meant for my mother, something about reviewing financial documents before Monday's meeting with potential investors. But because he'd shared it in the family chat, I now had access to files that revealed shocking truths about the Morrison family finances. The first document I opened was a bank statement from Morrison Development Company, my father's real estate business. I expected to see the healthy cash flow of a successful company. Instead, I found account balances that made my stomach drop. The company was $12 million in debt. $12 million. The business that had supported our comfortable family lifestyle for 20 years was essentially bankrupt. I scrolled through months of statements, finding a pattern of declining revenue and increasing debt payments. Property developments that should have been profitable had turned into money pits. Construction loans were in default. The company hadn't made a profit in 8 months. But there was more. As I dug deeper into the files, I found correspondence with creditors, foreclosure notices, and desperate emails from my father to various lenders begging for extensions and restructuring deals. The family's personal finances were equally dire. The house I'd grown up in, the one where my parents still hosted their elegant dinner parties, was mortgaged to the hilt and facing potential foreclosure. My parents had been living a complete lie, maintaining appearances while their financial empire crumbled around them. The cruel treatment of me suddenly made more sense. They were lashing out from their own desperation and fear. Then I found something even more disturbing. Email exchanges between my parents and my brothers revealed they'd been monitoring my social media accounts, trying to figure out how much money I actually had. They suspected I was more successful than I claimed, but they couldn't prove it. One email from my mother to Marcus said, "Frederick has been posting pictures from nice restaurants, and he's wearing expensive clothes. Either he's going into debt trying to look successful, or he's hiding money from us. We need to find out which." Marcus had responded, "I think he's bluffing about success to make us feel bad about cutting him off financially. The airplane ticket cancellation will flush out the truth. If he's really broke, he'll take the bus. If he has money hidden away, he'll find another way home and we'll know he's been lying to us." They'd orchestrated the entire airport crisis as a test. They wanted to force me into either revealing hidden wealth or proving I was truly as unsuccessful as they believed. It was a calculated psychological manipulation designed to expose what they saw as my deception. My phone rang, interrupting my research. It was Jake again. "Frederick, where are you? Please tell me you're not actually on a bus somewhere." "I'm on a plane, Jake. Charter flight. I'll be home by 1 a.m. and ready for the meeting." "Thank God. But listen, I've been doing some research on Pinnacle Outdoor Holdings, and I found something weird. Do you know who their primary investor is?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "Tell me." "David Steinberg. Ring any bells?" The name hit me like a physical blow. David Steinberg had been my father's business partner 15 years ago, back when Morrison Development was just getting started. They'd had a massive falling out over a land deal that my father had allegedly stolen from under Steinberg's nose. The lawsuit that followed had dragged on for 3 years and ended with Steinberg being forced out of the partnership. "Jake, are you telling me that David Steinberg is behind the acquisition offer?" "Not just behind it, he's orchestrating it. Pinnacle is basically his personal investment vehicle for real estate and outdoor recreation properties." "Frederick, I think this whole deal might be about more than just your business." My mind raced as the pieces fell into place. Steinberg knew exactly who I was. He'd probably been watching the Morrison family for years, waiting for the right opportunity to strike back at my father. My business success had given him the perfect weapon. By acquiring my company, Steinberg wasn't just getting a profitable business, he was getting access to the Morrison family through their failure son. He could infiltrate our family dynamics, potentially using me as a source of information about my father's financial difficulties. But there was more. If Steinberg knew about my father's current financial troubles, the timing of this acquisition offer wasn't coincidental. He was positioning himself to be in the perfect place to buy out my father's debts and essentially take control of Morrison Development. "Jake, I need you to do something for me. Research every shell company and investment vehicle that Steinberg has been using lately. I want to know if he's been involved in any of the financial pressure my father's company has been facing." "You think this is a revenge play?" "I think David Steinberg has been playing a very long game, and my family walked right into his trap." As our plane began its descent into Denver, I realized I was caught in the middle of a 15-year-old vendetta between two men who'd once been partners. My success had made me valuable to Steinberg, but not for the reasons I'd assumed. The question now was what to do with this information. I could walk away from the acquisition and protect my family from Steinberg's revenge. Or I could use this situation to my advantage, finally getting the recognition and respect I deserved while potentially saving my family from financial ruin. By the time we landed in Denver, I'd made my decision. I was going to play this game, but by my rules. It was time for everyone to learn that Frederick Morrison was nobody's pawn. I arrived home at 1:15 a.m., but sleep was impossible. Instead, I spent the night researching David Steinberg's business activities over the past 2 years. What I found was a methodical campaign of financial warfare against my father's company. Steinberg hadn't just been waiting for revenge, he'd been actively orchestrating my father's downfall. Through a network of shell companies and investment partnerships, he'd been buying up debt obligations, manipulating construction contracts, and creating the very financial pressure that had brought Morrison Development to the brink of bankruptcy. The construction delays that had cost my father millions? Caused by subcontractors who were secretly controlled by Steinberg companies. The bank loans that had been unexpectedly called in early? Steinberg had purchased those debt obligations and demanded immediate payment. The zoning issues that had killed 3 major development projects? Steinberg had been funding the community opposition groups. My father had no idea he was fighting a war against his former partner. He thought his troubles were just bad luck and market conditions. At 6 a.m., I called Jake with my new plan. Jake, I'm going through with the acquisition, but I'm changing the terms. I want to add a clause that gives me first right of refusal on any real estate investments Pinnacle makes in the Denver area for the next 5 years. Frederick, that's a weird addition to an outdoor gear acquisition. Why would you want that? Trust me. Just make it happen before the meeting. The Pinnacle offices were in a gleaming downtown high-rise, all glass and steel designed to intimidate. I arrived 30 minutes early, wearing my best suit and carrying a leather briefcase that contained copies of all the financial documents I'd discovered about my family's situation. David Steinberg was exactly what I'd expected. 60 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of polished confidence that came from decades of successful business warfare. When he smiled at me across the conference table, I saw something predatory in his expression. Frederick Morrison, he said, extending his hand. I've been looking forward to meeting Robert Morrison's son, Mr. Steinberg. I understand you and my father have a history together. Ancient history. Water under the bridge. Today is about your impressive business and its future potential. For the first hour, everything proceeded normally. Contracts were reviewed, financial projections were discussed, and legal terms were negotiated. The $50 million valuation held firm, and my additional clause about real estate investments was accepted without much discussion. But then Steinberg made a comment that revealed his true intentions. Frederick, I hope this acquisition will be the beginning of a long relationship between our companies. I'd love to hear more about your family's business activities. Perhaps there are opportunities for collaboration. What kind of collaboration? Well, your father's development company must have insights into the Denver real estate market that could benefit our investment strategies. I kept my expression neutral. Actually, Mr. Steinberg, I don't think my father's company is in a position to collaborate with anyone right now. Steinberg's smile faltered slightly. Oh? Is Robert having difficulties? You tell me. Aren't you the one who's been systematically destroying his business for the past 2 years? The conference room went completely silent. Steinberg's lawyers exchanged nervous glances. Jake looked confused and worried. I'm not sure what you're implying, Frederick. I opened my briefcase and spread financial documents across the table. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Shell company ownership records, debt purchasing agreements, subcontractor relationships. You've been waging financial warfare against my father's company, and you thought acquiring my business would give you inside access to finish him off. Steinberg's polished facade cracked. Your father cheated me out of millions 15 years ago. Everything I've done has been legitimate business. Maybe. But here's what you didn't count on. I'm not my father. And I'm not some naive kid you can manipulate. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the Denver skyline. Here's my new offer, Mr. Steinberg. You can still acquire my company for $50 million. But you're going to stop your war against my father's business. You're going to sell him back the debt obligations you've purchased at fair market value. And you're going to cancel any contracts you have with subcontractors that are designed to sabotage his projects. Or what? Or I walk away from this deal, and you explain to your investors why you just lost a $50 million acquisition because you couldn't let go of a 15-year-old grudge. Steinberg was quiet for a long moment. You're protecting a man who doesn't even respect you enough to believe in your success. That's my problem, not yours. Do we have a deal or not? 2 hours later, I walked out of that building as the newest multimillionaire in Denver, with signed agreements that would not only secure my financial future, but also save my father's business from destruction. But I still hadn't told my family about any of it. They thought I was somewhere on a bus between Phoenix and Denver, learning important lessons about financial responsibility. It was time to go home and teach them some lessons of their own. I drove straight from the acquisition meeting to my family's house in Cherry Hills Village, still wearing my business suit, and carrying the signed contracts that had just made me $50 million richer. It was 3 p.m. on Monday afternoon, and I could see several cars in the driveway that didn't belong to my parents. Through the large front windows, I could see my family hosting what appeared to be an elegant lunch party. Multiple couples in expensive clothes were seated around the dining room table, sharing wine and conversation. This was exactly the kind of gathering my parents used to maintain their image of success, even while their business crumbled around them. I parked on the street and walked up the familiar brick pathway, my heart pounding with anticipation and nervousness. I had no idea how this confrontation would go, but I knew it would change everything between us forever. My mother answered the door, her face showing complete shock at seeing me standing there. "Frederick, what are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be on a bus?" "Hello, Mom. Mind if I join your party?" She stepped aside, still confused. "But how did you get here so quickly? The bus ride from Phoenix takes at least 18 hours. We'll talk about that in a minute. Right now, I'd love to meet your guests." As I walked into the dining room, conversation stopped abruptly. My father stood up from the head of the table, his expression a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "Frederick, this is not a good time. We're entertaining potential investors for the company." "Potential investors? Dad, that's perfect. I'd love to hear about investment opportunities." My mother attempted to maintain social grace despite her obvious discomfort. "Everyone, this is our youngest son, Frederick. He's been traveling for business." One of the guests, a distinguished man in his 60s, extended his hand. "Gerald Patterson, Patterson Investment Group." "What kind of business are you in, Frederick?" Before I could answer, my father interrupted. "Frederick has been exploring different career options. Nothing concrete yet." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Even in front of strangers, he couldn't resist diminishing me. Marcus and Thomas were both there with their wives, and they looked equally uncomfortable about my unexpected appearance. Marcus spoke up first. "Frederick, shouldn't you be on that bus ride you were planning? I thought you learned your lesson about travel planning." The table erupted in polite laughter, clearly thinking this was some kind of family inside joke, but I could see the cruelty behind my brother's smiles. "Actually, Marcus, I learned quite a lot over the past 24 hours. About family, about loyalty, about the difference between perception and reality." My mother tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "Frederick, why don't you grab some lunch from the kitchen and let us finish our business discussion?" "Business discussion? Mom, I think I should stay. After all, business is what I do best." My father's face reddened slightly. "Frederick, please don't embarrass yourself in front of our guests." That was the moment I decided to stop playing games. Embarrass myself? Dad, the only embarrassing thing here is how little you know about your own son's life. Gerald Patterson looked intrigued. "Frederick, you mentioned you're in business. What industry?" "E-commerce. Outdoor recreation gear specifically. I started a company called Morrison Outdoor Enterprises about 2 years ago." Thomas laughed openly. "Frederick's internet hobby. He thinks selling camping gear online makes him an entrepreneur. How much revenue does your hobby generate? Gerald asked, ignoring Thomas's dismissive comment. This year? About $14 million. The dining room went completely silent. Wine glasses froze halfway to lips. My parents stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. 14 million in revenue? Gerald repeated. That's quite impressive for a 2-year-old company. Thank you. Actually, I just completed the sale of the company this morning. Acquisition price was $50 million. My mother's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. My father's face had gone completely white. $50 million? He whispered. That's correct. Would you like to see the signed contracts? I pulled the acquisition agreements from my briefcase and placed them on the table. Gerald Patterson, being an investment professional, immediately recognized the legal documents and began scanning the terms. This is legitimate, he announced to the table. Pinnacle Outdoor Holdings, full acquisition, $50 million purchase price. Frederick, congratulations on an extraordinary exit. The room erupted in confused conversation. The other guests were congratulating me while my family sat in stunned silence. My brothers looked like they'd been physically slapped. My father finally found his voice. Frederick, why didn't you tell us about any of this? When exactly should I have told you, Dad? During one of our conversations where you lectured me about being irresponsible? Or maybe when you called me a failure for dropping out of law school? Or perhaps yesterday when you deliberately canceled my flight to teach me a lesson about financial planning? Gerald Patterson's eyebrows shot up. Someone canceled your flight? That seems rather extreme. My family thought I needed to learn about consequences for my poor life choices. They assumed I was broke and calling them for money, so they sabotaged my travel to force me to take a bus home. The other guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. The social atmosphere had shifted completely, and it was clear that everyone at the table was reassessing what they thought they knew about the Morrison family dynamics. So how did you get home so quickly? My mother asked weakly. I chartered a private jet. $12,000, but it got me to this morning's acquisition meeting on time. Marcus spoke up, his voice defensive. Frederick, if you had this kind of money, why were you living in that small apartment and driving that old car? Because unlike some people, I don't need to prove my worth through material possessions. I was reinvesting profits to grow the business, instead of spending money on status symbols. Thomas tried a different approach. Why keep it secret from your family? That doesn't make sense. I looked around the table, making eye contact with each family member, before answering. I kept it secret because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer. And now I know. The silence that followed was deafening. Gerald Patterson cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should reschedule our investment discussion for another time, Robert. It seems your family has some things to work through. As the guests began making polite excuses and gathering their belongings, I realized that my moment of triumph felt more hollow than satisfying. Yes, I'd shocked my family and proven my success. But I'd also destroyed their dinner party and humiliated them in front of potential business partners. The victory I'd imagined for so long had come at a cost I hadn't fully considered. After the guests left, my family and I sat in the living room surrounded by an uncomfortable silence that seemed to stretch forever. The elegant facade of the dinner party had been stripped away, leaving only the raw truth of our relationships and the financial realities we'd all been hiding. My father was the first to speak, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. Frederick, I owe you an apology. We all do. Dad. Apologies don't undo what you did. You didn't just hurt my feelings. You almost cost me the biggest opportunity of my life. My mother reached for a tissue, her eyes red with tears she was trying not to shed. We thought we were helping you. We thought you needed tough love to face reality. Whose reality, Mom? The reality where I'm a failure because I didn't follow the path you chose for me? Or the actual reality where I built a multi-million-dollar business while you assumed I was broke? Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Frederick, we had no idea. Your lifestyle, your apartment, your car, nothing indicated that kind of success. Because I didn't need your validation or approval. I was building something real instead of maintaining appearances. That comment hit home harder than I'd intended. The financial documents I'd discovered showed that my family's impressive lifestyle was being funded entirely by debt. The house we were sitting in was mortgaged beyond its value. The luxury cars in the driveway had payments they could barely afford. Thomas spoke up, his voice defensive. "Look, we made a mistake. But you have to understand how this looked from our perspective. You dropped out of law school. You were secretive about your finances, and you were always vague about your work. I was secretive because I knew this is how you'd react. You couldn't accept that I might succeed without following your predetermined plan for my life." My father leaned forward, his business instincts finally kicking in despite his emotional turmoil. "Frederick, can we talk about something practical? Your acquisition, was it with Pinnacle Outdoor Holdings?" "Yes." "Why?" His face went pale again. "Pinnacle is controlled by David Steinberg." "I know. You know, Frederick, Steinberg has been trying to destroy our company for 2 years. If he's involved in your business now..." I pulled out my laptop and showed him the research I'd compiled about Steinberg's systematic campaign against Morrison Development. As he scrolled through the evidence of shell companies, debt manipulation, and contract sabotage, his expression shifted from confusion to anger to something approaching despair. "He's been playing me this entire time," my father whispered. "Every financial problem we've had, every setback, every crisis, he orchestrated all of it. Dad, there's something else you need to know. Steinberg thought acquiring my company would give him inside access to your business operations. He wanted to use me to finish destroying you." The room was quiet as my family absorbed this information. They were beginning to understand that my success wasn't just about proving myself. It had potentially saved them from complete financial ruin. "What did you do?" my father asked. "I made him a deal. He gets my company, but he stops his war against you. He sells back your debt obligations at fair value and cancels his sabotage contracts." My mother gasped. "You used your success to save our business?" "I used my success to save our family." Marcus stood up and began pacing. "Frederick, I don't understand. After everything we put you through, after the things we said and did, why would you protect us?" "Because you're my family. Because despite everything, I love you. And because I finally understand that your cruelty came from fear and desperation, not genuine malice." I showed them the financial documents I'd found, explaining how Steinberg's manipulation had created the very stress that had made them lash out at me. They'd been fighting for their financial survival, without even knowing they were under attack. "Your business is going to be okay," I told my father. "But there have to be changes. Real changes in how this family treats each other." Over the next 2 hours, we had the most honest conversation of our lives. My parents acknowledged that their treatment of me had been cruel and unfair. My brothers admitted that they'd enjoyed feeling superior to their unsuccessful younger brother. Everyone recognized that our family dynamic had been toxic and needed fundamental change. But more importantly, we talked about the future. My $50 million windfall wasn't just personal wealth. It was an opportunity to rebuild our relationships on a foundation of mutual respect rather than judgment and hierarchy. "Frederick," my father said, as evening approached, "I want to offer you something. The business that Steinberg tried to destroy, I want you to help me rebuild it. Not as my son who failed at law school, but as a successful entrepreneur who understands modern business." "Dad, I appreciate that, but I'm not sure." "I'm not asking you to give up your independence. I'm asking you to teach an old man how to build something worth passing on to his children. All of his children." My mother reached over and took my hand. "We wasted so many years being proud of the wrong things and disappointed in the right ones. I don't want to waste any more time." As I drove home that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope for my family's future. The victory wasn't just about proving my worth or getting revenge for their cruelty. It was about creating the possibility for genuine love and respect to replace the fear and judgment that had defined our relationships. The money was nice, but the real prize was getting my family back. 6 months later, I stood in the renovated offices of Morrison Development Company, looking out over the Denver skyline and reflecting on how dramatically everything had changed. The company that had been on the verge of bankruptcy was now thriving under new leadership and a completely different business philosophy. My father had kept his word about fundamental changes. Instead of traditional real estate development focused purely on profit, we'd repositioned the company to specialize in sustainable, affordable housing projects that served growing communities rather than displacing them. My experience in e-commerce and direct-to-consumer marketing had helped us develop innovative approaches to connecting with buyers and streamlining the purchasing process. More importantly, the family dynamics that had been poisoned by competition and judgment had been replaced by genuine collaboration and mutual respect. My parents had completed 6 months of family therapy, learning to communicate without the patterns of criticism and control that had defined their parenting style. They'd also made a public commitment to supporting all their children's career choices, regardless of whether those choices matched their personal expectations. Marcus had surprised everyone by leaving his high-stress corporate law position to join our company as general counsel. He'd admitted that he'd been miserable in pharmaceutical law, but had stayed because he thought it was what our parents wanted. Now he was using his legal skills to help families navigate the home buying process and ensure our business practices met the highest ethical standards. Thomas had remained in medicine, but he'd started volunteering his time to provide healthcare services for construction workers and their families. The success of our company had allowed him to pursue the kind of meaningful medical practice he'd always dreamed of, but couldn't afford while paying off medical school loans. The most significant change was in my relationship with my parents. My mother, Helen, had become my biggest advocate and supporter, proudly sharing my achievements with anyone who would listen. She'd publicly apologized for her cruel text messages and had committed to rebuilding our trust through consistent actions rather than just words. My father, Robert, had stepped back from day-to-day operations and taken on a mentoring role, using his decades of experience to guide strategic decisions while allowing me to lead the company's modernization efforts. The partnership we developed was based on mutual respect for each other's strengths, rather than his need to control or my need to rebel. But perhaps the most meaningful change was what we'd done with our success. Using part of the acquisition money, I'd established the Morrison Family Foundation, which provided scholarships and business loans for young entrepreneurs whose families didn't support their career choices. Every month, we received applications from young people whose stories reminded me of my own struggles with family expectations and the courage required to pursue unconventional paths. One particular scholarship recipient, a young woman named Sarah, who dropped out of medical school to start a nonprofit focused on mental health resources, had become like a little sister to me. Her family had cut off all support when she left medicine, just as mine had done when I left law school. Seeing her success and watching her family eventually come around to supporting her mission had reinforced my belief that love and understanding could overcome even the deepest disappointments. The business itself had exceeded all our expectations. By combining sustainable development practices with innovative marketing and customer service, we'd created a model that other companies were trying to replicate. The homes we built weren't just profitable, they were helping to address Denver's affordable housing crisis while maintaining high standards of quality and environmental responsibility. Jake Patterson had joined us as Chief Technology Officer, bringing the same innovative thinking that had made Morrison Outdoor Enterprises successful to the real estate industry. Together, we developed online tools that made home buying transparent and accessible, eliminating many of the traditional barriers that prevented working families from achieving homeownership. David Steinberg had kept his word about ending his campaign against our company, but the experience had taught us valuable lessons about business relationships and the importance of ethical practices. We'd implemented strict policies about competitor relationships and made sure our success never came at the expense of deliberately harming other businesses or families. The most unexpected development had been the relationship that emerged between Steinberg and my father. After months of legal negotiations and gradual trust building, they'd been able to address the 15-year-old grievances that had fueled their destructive conflict. While they would never be friends, they'd found a way to coexist professionally and even collaborate on projects that benefited the entire Denver development community. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, I found a handwritten note on my desk from my father, It read, "Frederick, thank you for teaching an old man that success isn't about being right, it's about being willing to grow. I'm proud of the man you've become and grateful for the patience you've shown while we learned to be better parents." These were words I'd waited my entire life to hear, but receiving them now felt different than I'd imagined. The victory wasn't in proving my worth to people who had doubted me, it was in creating space for all of us to become better versions of ourselves. That evening, I joined my family for our weekly dinner at my parents' house. These gatherings had become sacred time for us, opportunities to share our successes and challenges without judgment or competition. My nephew Jake, Marcus's 8-year-old son, always insisted that I tell stories about business and entrepreneurship, and tonight was no exception. "Uncle Frederick," he said as we finished dessert, "my teacher asked our class what we want to be when we grow up. I told her I want to be like you, someone who helps families build their dreams." Looking around the table at my parents' proud faces and my brother's genuine smiles, I realized that this was what real wealth looked like. Not the $50 million in my bank account, or the successful businesses we'd built, but the love and respect we'd created by choosing forgiveness over revenge and understanding over judgment. The journey from that painful moment in the Phoenix airport to this peaceful family dinner had taught me that sometimes the people who hurt us most are fighting battles we don't understand. My parents' cruelty had come from their own fear and desperation, just as my secrecy had come from my need to prove myself independently. But the most important lesson was this: true success isn't about accumulating wealth or achieving recognition, it's about using your resources and abilities to lift up the people around you, even when they've failed to lift you up themselves. As we cleared the dinner dishes together, laughing at my father's terrible jokes and listening to my mother's plans for the family foundation's next fundraising event, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the long, painful journey that had brought us to this moment of genuine happiness and mutual respect. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from transforming them into family. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt underestimated or dismissed by the people closest to you? How did you handle that situation? And what would you do differently if you could go back? Share your stories in the comments below. I believe we can all learn from each other's experiences with family expectations and finding our own paths to success. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges and building the life you truly want. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by other people's expectations. Thank you for taking this journey with me. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is succeed quietly until you're ready to speak loudly. Until next time, keep believing in yourself even when nobody else does.